The kettlebell swing is one of my favorite exercises for developing a explosive hip extension. So going into a hinged position and then using your posterior chain, your hamstrings and your glutes to extend up with power. This is one of my favorite tools because it has a direct translation to movement skills like running, jumping, and fighting. So we're gonna go through the basic technique today and the way that I teach approaching that kettlebell swing. So first of all, the swing, as I like to teach it, is more of a hip hinge than a squat. So a hinge means that you are karate chopping the hips and the torso is coming forward and the hips are sliding back. So I'm now facing the floor essentially with my chest, the knees are slightly bent, and I feel this tension in my hamstrings like a bow. That is different than a squat where the chest stays upright and there is a lot of knee bend. So the basic difference between a squat and a hinge is how much the knees are bending and then where your torso or your eyes are pointed. So a good way to practice this is just to start with a kettlebell deadlift, which teaches that hinging pattern. So you're gonna get tall, shoulders back and down, abs engaged, karate chop the hips so that your hamstrings and glutes are loaded, the abs are tall, grab the weight and drive up with good power. So drive through the heels and stand tall. And when you're at the bottom, you wanna feel, one, is the tension in your hips and hamstrings? That's good. And then two, is your chest tall? So we're not bent over here and rounded, but the chest is tall, the shoulders are back and down, and we can drive through that way. Step two is then to start adding that loading position for the swing. So with this, you want to treat it almost like hiking a football. So you get into that good hinged position, abs engaged, spine long, hips back. Put the bell out in front of you as far as your arms can extend, and then you're just going to hike it back and then send it back. So we're talking about using our lats here. So really think about using your back muscles and the lats to hike it back. Then step three is once you feel that the weight is all the way in that back position, my wrists are against my thighs. That's when I know it's time to stand up. So all that tension in my hamstrings and glutes, I'm gonna stand up and almost launch the weight off of my hips. So it looks like this. Come back, drive up, catch it, and then send it back. So you wanna catch the bell with that same hinged position as you start. When it comes back down, you don't let it wrench you, you sit back with it. Once that feels comfortable, then you add the repeating swing. So essentially, instead of putting it back down on the ground, you're just continuing to catch the kettlebell in your hips, drive forward, and extend through that weight. It looks like this. I'm standing tall, squeezing my glutes at the top. I'm waiting until the last second to bend at the hips, and I'm basically just loading and snapping quickly. I'm not really using my arms at all, but I am keeping my shoulder blades back and down, and I'm preventing the weight from pulling my shoulder blades forward. So I'm using my upper back and my mid back and my lats to kind of tame that weight and to not let it push me around, I'm tethered, but then my arms are relaxed. And it's all from my hips. I'm not raising or lowering that with my shoulders at all. So, one thing to show this way is your legs form a triangle, and you essentially want to keep the kettlebell in the small triangle that's from the knees above. So if I'm coming down here and letting the kettlebell drop by close to my ankles, I'm losing a lot of that power, and I'm putting a lot of that weight in my back to do that. So instead, you want to try to keep the kettlebell from the knees above, and that's going to put it more into your hip drive. And it's really like my upper wrists that are engaging and making contact with my thighs here in the back. All right. So the quick recap is get into a hinged position, not a squat, but a hinge. You're gonna load the kettlebell in the high triangle, wrists contacting your inner thigh, and then you're going to extend through, stand tall, squeeze your abs, and keep your shoulder blades back and down. Don't let the weight pull you out. So that full movement, hike it back, drive, catch it at the last second. Say tall, 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 catch it, drive. Catch it, drive. Catch it, drive. Let's talk a little bit about breathing and bracing. So when the kettlebell is between the legs, you want to inhale and tighten the abs and keep the spine tall. And then as you extend the hips, you're going to exhale and drive out through the weight. So inhale. It's like taking little sips of air and then using the inhale to connect with your core and stay rigid through the torso. The last point here is just to talk about kind of progression. And a lot of people with kettlebells, these are explosive movements, and your hips are very powerful. So we tend to start too light, and that actually makes it harder to learn the kettlebell technique because it's too easy for us to just muscle the weight. So a couple things to look out for. The first is if you can lift the kettlebell with your arms straight out and control it, it's probably too light for the purposes of the kettlebell swing. You want something that's heavy enough that your hips have to drive it up, and you can't really control it with the arms alone. Another thing to think about is how high the kettlebell is going on the swing. If you are putting so much hip power into that swing that it's flying all the way up above your nose or even above your chest, then it's probably too light. That was 25 pounds. This is 70 pounds. So really, from your chest height, just parallel to the floor, that's an ideal range to lift it. And even if it's lower, that's okay too. So with a 70-pound weight, I'm still doing a good hip drive, but it's not getting up nearly as high. And if I add more hip power, then the kettlebell does get to about nose height. And that's how I know I'm working with the right weight. So think about that. Are you able to get it well above the nose? Then it's probably a little too easy and you could go up and wait. Or if you can lift it with your arms alone, it's probably too easy and you don't want to be using your arms anyway. That's the kettlebell swing.